is apologetic. He's in a better space, of course, than what he was after. People are human, and as humans, sometimes we make mistakes. Things like this don't just happen.
You think you've seen every angle of that Oscar slap, right? The moment the world froze when Will Smith stormed the stage and cracked Chris Rock across the face. But what if I told you there's a part of that story nobody's really told? Because while everyone was focused on Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle's reactions, two other giants in comedy, Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy, were quietly watching too. These weren't just random observers, they were Will's real-life friends, men who laughed with him, worked beside him, and knew the real Will long before that slap ever happened. And when they finally spoke out, what they revealed didn't just complicate the story, it shattered the picture-perfect image of Will Smith the world thought it knew. This wasn't comedians chasing clout or throwing shade for clicks, no way. These were insiders, people who understood the game, who've seen the pressure, the ego, and the quiet battles that define Hollywood manhood. And when Will's mask slipped that night, they refused to stay silent.
On all of the people, Tim and Trevor and Zach.
Stick around, because by the end of this story, you'll see Will Smith in a way you can't unsee for real. What Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy said might change how you look at him forever. So tell us, after hearing what went down, do you still see Will the same way? March 27th, 2022, the 94th Academy Awards. The Dolby Theater in Hollywood was glowing under 1 billion lights, packed with the biggest stars on the planet. Cameras flashed, diamonds sparkled, and everyone knew this was supposed to be Will Smith's night. After years of being Hollywood's charming good guy, the Fresh Prince had finally evolved into the serious actor chasing Oscar gold for his role as Richard Williams in King Richard. It was his moment to shine, until everything flipped in seconds. Then came Chris Rock, sharp suit, blue velvet jacket, confident stride. He hit the stage to present Best Documentary Feature, cracking jokes left and right, just doing what Chris Rock does best. The crowd was eating it up, until his eyes caught Jada Pinkett Smith. Her shaved head, something she had opened up about, caused by alopecia, became the target of a quick jab. Chris threw out what he'd later called the nicest joke he'd ever told, a light line comparing her to G.I. Jane 2. The audience chuckled. Jada didn't. She rolled her eyes hard. And Will, he laughed at first, but then something in his face changed. Cameras caught it, that cold switch. His smile dropped. His jaw tightened, and it was like a storm built inside him in real time. Without a word, Will stood up, calm, steady, like he already knew exactly what he was about to do. Step by step, he walked across that stage, all eyes locked on him, and then crack, a slap that echoed through the Dolby Theater, loud enough to shake the room. Chris stumbled back, eyes wide in disbelief. The audience froze. No one could believe what they just saw. The entire Dolby Theater went dead silent. You could almost feel the air freeze, every superstar in that room holding their breath, unsure what to do next. But what happened after the slap might have been even more disturbing than the slap itself. Will Smith calmly walked back to his seat like nothing happened. Security didn't move. The Academy didn't step in. Nobody stopped the show. And less than 40 minutes later, that same man who had just smacked Chris Rock in front of the world was back on that same stage accepting an Oscar for Best Actor, to a standing ovation. Can you believe that? The world had just watched a man commit assault on live television, and Hollywood rewarded him for it. That moment split everything wide open. Comedians like Chris Rock and Dave Chappelle would later break it down, analyzing what really went on behind that smile. But they weren't the only ones who understood the deeper story. Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy were watching too.
And his wife are both nominated. Now, if she loses...
Two men who'd lived in the same world, seen the same power games, and knew exactly what the cameras didn't show. When their takes finally surfaced, everything about that night looked different. Kevin Hart, the friend who said the truth nobody wanted to face, didn't rush to defend or destroy Will. He played it smart. See, Kevin and Will weren't just co-stars, they were tight. Both had climbed the same ruthless Hollywood ladder. Both had faced the pressure to always seem joyful, polished, perfect, especially as black men constantly performing positivity for a world that judges their every move. That's why Kevin's silence at first spoke volumes. He didn't panic or post wild takes. He waited, he watched, he studied the fallout like someone who's been through enough scandals to know when to speak. But there's one thing about comedians. They might stay quiet for a while, but never forever. The truth always finds its way out, whether it slips through a joke, a small comment in an interview, or a quiet truth that becomes too loud to ignore. When Kevin Hart finally spoke about that slap and everything that came after, his words hit harder than any punchline. He didn't turn it into a simple, Will was wrong or Chris had it coming situation. No, Kevin went deeper, cutting straight to the root of something way bigger and way more uncomfortable.
He talked about the system, the one that shapes men like Will Smith long before moments like that ever happen. Kevin exposed how Hollywood's obsession with image and strength traps men, especially successful black men, in a non-stop performance. They're not just acting for movie roles, they're acting for acceptance. Every smile, every interview, every red carpet moment becomes another test. Are you strong enough? Are you calm enough? Are you the version of yourself the public wants you to see? And Kevin wasn't talking theory, he's lived it. He's faced public scandals, stumbled under the pressure, gone to therapy, and come back with scars and self-awareness to show for it. He's been brutally honest about separating who he really is from the persona the world expects him to play. So when he saw Will Smith march across that stage, Kevin didn't just see a man losing his temper. He saw something years in the making. A man who'd been quietly swallowing humiliation, smiling through chaos, keeping it polished while his private pain was front-page news. And when that pressure finally exploded, it didn't just crack his image, it shattered it right there in front of millions. Kevin's message cut deep, straight to the bone. He made it clear you can smile through anything, pretend everything is fine, and carry that pain for only so long before the pressure finally cracks you open. But here's the sting. Kevin didn't just show sympathy for Will Smith, he also held him accountable. And how he did it revealed something powerful about the quiet code that exists between men at that level of fame. See, in that world, there are rules. You don't get to unload your pain on someone smaller than you. You don't get to throw hands just to prove you're strong. And you definitely don't get to hit another man in front of millions and then stand up 40 minutes later, acting like nothing happened, holding an Oscar like it's all good. Kevin's message, even if he never said it outright, was crystal clear. Will didn't snap because of the joke. He snapped because something inside him had already been broken long before that night. The joke was just the spark that hit a pile of emotions that had been burning for years. And when a man with that kind of power reaches that level of emotional chaos, nobody around him is truly safe. Not the comedian sharing the stage, not even the friends who dared to speak truth to him. So here's the question that hits hardest. Did the people closest to Will fail him, or did Will Smith fail himself? Drop your answer in the comments right now. Because next comes the Eddie Murphy factor. Hollywood's quiet witness finally speaks. And if Kevin Hart's perspective was a scalpel, sharp, precise, surgical, then Eddie Murphy's was a straight-up sledgehammer wrapped in 50 years of hard-earned truth. Eddie doesn't talk like other stars. He doesn't tweet his thoughts or chase headlines. When Eddie Murphy speaks, the whole industry listens. Eddie Murphy doesn't do apology tours. He doesn't drop emotional videos begging for forgiveness or try to explain himself to people who've already made their minds. Eddie says what he means what he says, and that's exactly why Hollywood's never really known what to do with him. For over 50 decades, he stayed brutally real, raw, untamed, and 100% himself. Beverly Hills Cop, Coming to America, 48 Hours, Delirious, Raw. Eddie didn't just make classics, he defined eras. He's not just a legend, he's the blueprint. Now, picture this. That same legend sitting in the Dolby Theater the night of the slap. Yeah, Eddie Murphy was right there. He wasn't there as a bystander or just another name in the crowd. He was being honored, receiving the Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award, one of the Academy's highest honors. That night was supposed to be a celebration of everything he'd built, his legacy, his generosity, his contribution to the art form itself. But instead of a flawless night of praise, Eddie found himself witnessing one of the most chaotic moments in Oscar history. He saw it all: the walk, the slap, the stunned silence, and then the standing ovation 40 minutes later. Imagine sitting there watching a man assault another on live TV, and then seeing that same man celebrated minutes after. Eddie didn't need to say much that night. His silence said plenty.
But when he did finally speak on it later, Eddie didn't sugarcoat or dance around the truth. He cut right through the noise like a man who's seen every Hollywood illusion crumble before. He pointed out what most people completely missed: the sequence, the deliberate way it all went down. Will Smith didn't stumble into that moment. He stood up, made that walk, and chose every step of what came next. Will Smith didn't just react, he moved with purpose. He walked across that stage, raised his hand, made contact, and then calmly walked back to his seat like it was nothing. Eddie Murphy, a man who's been commanding stages since his teenage years, who survived every kind of crowd and pressure, saw it instantly for what it really was. This wasn't impulse. It wasn't an emotional flare-up. This was intent, a conscious choice made under a billion lights. And that detail changes everything, because passion, that can be understood. You can forgive a man who loses control for a split second, but choices, deliberate actions, they tell a different story, one that's harder to explain away. Eddie knew the difference between an emotional flare-up and a man making a statement through his actions. That's why his hit's so hard. Then, he pointed out something even deeper, a truth that every performer, including Kevin Hart, would instantly feel in their bones. The stage is sacred ground. It's a space built on trust, a silent agreement between performer and audience. You step on that stage to share something real, something human, and in return, the audience stays in their lane. Nobody crosses that line. Nobody violates that safety. But that night, Will Smith shattered that unspoken law. He didn't just slap Chris Rock, he invaded sacred territory. He turned a space meant for art, honesty, and vulnerability into a place of violence and fear. The ripple from that act wasn't just about one man hitting another. It was about the whole industry watching the moment that trust broke.
Chris, I apologize to you. My behavior was unacceptable.
Eddie's reaction wasn't fueled by anger alone. It was grief, real heavy grief for what that night exposed. The Oscars, Hollywood's biggest celebration of storytelling and creative expression, watched a sacred rule collapse and responded by applauding the man who broke it. That's the moment that made Eddie Murphy's quiet observation echo across the industry, a single thought that still captures something brutally true about Hollywood itself. Eddie Murphy laid it out plain. Will Smith had 100 ways to handle that moment without throwing a single punch. He could have leaned over and whispered something to Jada. He could have waited until the cameras were off and talked to Chris backstage man to man. He could have even taken that Oscar stage later and flipped the whole thing with class, using humor, using heart, showing the world how real grace looks under pressure. Because let's be honest, a man like Will Smith had every tool at his disposal: decades of experience, charm, emotional intelligence, and a lifetime of public composure. Yet in that moment, he chose violence. The one move that proved he wasn't the man he'd spent 30 years convincing the world he was. And that's where Eddie's truth cuts deep. The slap wasn't just a slip-up or a burst of emotion. It was something darker. It wasn't a failure of control. It was a failure of character. And that difference means everything. That's the mask Dave Chappelle saw. The same mask Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy confirmed in their own ways.
the polished persona finally cracking open for everyone to see. Just 5 weeks after the Oscars, Chappelle was on stage at the Hollywood Bowl, the same Chappelle who would soon face his own on-stage attack that eerily tied his story to Chris Rock's forever. During that performance, Chappelle said something that sent a shockwave through the comedy world. Will Smith did the impression of a perfect person for 30 years, and he ripped his mask off and showed us he was as ugly as the rest of us. That one line unlocked everything. 30 years, think about that. 3 decades of being America's favorite good guy. The Fresh Prince who turned into a global superstar. The man who could headline a blockbuster one year and win awards the next. He made white audiences comfortable, made black audiences proud, and inspired a generation of kids to believe in him, to want to be him. But the truth behind Chappelle's words hit like a thunderclap. Hollywood had fallen in love with a performance, not a person. Will Smith had mastered the act of being everything to everyone until the mask finally came off. More than anything, Will Smith built that image, brick by brick, smile by smile, a masterpiece of charm and control. Every red carpet moment, every flawless interview, every perfect husband headline, it was all part of the performance. And that's what makes it so devastating when Chappelle, Hart, and Murphy all land on the same brutal truth. The perfection wasn't real. It was a role, a mask so carefully maintained that even Will started believing it. Kevin Hart understood that truth on a personal level. He's been open about his own struggles with performing happiness, building a brand of endless positivity while quietly carrying the weight of fame, guilt, and public judgment. He's admitted the therapy it took, the inner work he had to do just to separate Kevin Hart, the brand, from Kevin Hart, the man. Because in Hollywood, if you don't make that separation, the performance eats you alive.
That's why Kevin's view of Will isn't cruel or dismissive. It's sad. It's grief, not judgment. Because Kevin sees the path too clearly. The man who invests everything in image, who turns confidence into armor, who fakes peace so well he forgets what real peace even feels like. Then one day the act collapses, and he's standing there, unsure who he really is anymore. Eddie Murphy saw that trap coming decades earlier and refused to fall into it. Back in the late 80s, when he was the biggest name on the planet, Hollywood tried to polish him up, to smooth out the danger, the edge, the authenticity that made him iconic. But Eddie wasn't having it. Instead of letting the machine rewrite him, he walked away. He chose himself over the system, even if it meant losing momentum, money, and mainstream approval. Yeah, it cost him career-wise for a while, but when Eddie came back, he did it on his terms. And that return hit harder than ever, because this time, it wasn't the world's version of Eddie Murphy on that stage. It was the real one. And Hollywood, for once, loved him even more for it. Will Smith took the opposite road every single time. While others stepped back to protect their truth, Will doubled down on the performance. He kept feeding the Hollywood machine, kept curating that perfect image, kept burying his real pain behind a picture-perfect smile. For 30 years, he became exactly what the world wanted him to be: charming, clean, lovable, until that night when everything cracked wide open. Dave Chappelle said it best. He hoped Will wouldn't put the mask back on. He said he wanted Will to finally let his real face breathe. On the surface, that sounds kind, and it is, but it's also a dare. Chappelle wasn't just offering sympathy, he was calling Will out. Because what he really meant was, the person you've been performing all these years, that wasn't you. And the real question hanging in the air is, does Will Smith have the courage to stop pretending? Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy both understood that challenge better than anyone. They've each faced moments when fame demanded a mask, when the world wanted them to play nice, smile, and hide the pain. And both of them, in their own ways, fought back to reclaim their truth. But Will, has the mask been on so long that he's forgotten what's underneath it? Be honest, do you think he can even recognize his real self anymore? Tell us what you think below. Then came the entanglement, the truth nobody could keep ignoring. When Chris Rock hit the stage at Baltimore's Hippodrome Theater for his Netflix live special, Selective Outrage, on March 4, 2023, he didn't just clap back, he dissected the entire situation like a surgeon. For the first time, he gave the world what they'd all been whispering about, a raw, unfiltered breakdown of Will Smith's meltdown. Chris didn't waste time throwing jokes. He went straight to the psychology behind it all. He coined selective outrage, describing how people pick and choose who they punish, depending on convenience or emotion. And when he turned that lens on Will Smith, it was brutal but brilliant. He exposed the contradiction everyone saw, but no one dared to say out loud. That the slap wasn't about G.I. Jane. It was never about the joke. It was about a man drowning in humiliation with nowhere left to put it. Will couldn't lash out at August Alsina. He couldn't fight the endless internet mockery. He couldn't control the millions who had turned his pain into a viral circus. So when he stood in front of a global audience, with a stage, cameras, and a smaller man standing right in front of him, that's where all that pressure exploded. Chris said it plain, "I love Will Smith. My whole life I rooted for this guy." But that night, Will didn't hit Chris Rock because of words. He hit him because Chris was safe to hit. He was the right size, in the right spot, at the right time, and Will needed an outlet for everything he couldn't fight anywhere else. Kevin Hart recognized that pattern immediately. He's talked for years about how dangerous it gets when a man's sense of self becomes completely tied to what the world thinks of him. When your image becomes your identity, private humiliation starts feeling like death, because it's not just embarrassment, it's erasure. And when that kind of pain festers with no release, unbearable things demand an outlet. The outlet Will Smith chose that night said everything about where he truly was inside. It wasn't about protection or principle. It was about pain boiling over. Eddie Murphy, watching all this, understood it immediately. Because Eddie's the total opposite, a man who never let Hollywood define who he is. Through decades of fame, fortune, and madness, Murphy always kept something sacred: himself. His sense of identity was never up for sale. Eddie's career has had wild highs and brutal lows, box office bombs, tabloid attacks, scandals that could have crushed weaker stars, but he never broke publicly. Not because he hasn't known pain, but because he refused to let the industry own his reflection. While Will Smith spent years molding himself into Hollywood's perfect hero, Eddie stayed grounded in who he really was, flaws and all. So when Eddie watched that slap, he didn't see a man standing up for his wife. He saw a man who'd completely lost touch with his own core. A man so deep in the performance of strength that he mistook violence for power. That's not masculinity. That's desperation dressed as control. And just when the world thought the storm around the Oscars was finally calming down, something wild happened that nobody wanted to talk about. The copycat effect. 5 weeks after the slap, Dave Chappelle was performing live at the Hollywood Bowl during Netflix's comedy festival when chaos struck again. Out of nowhere, a 23-year-old named Isaiah Lee broke through security, jumped the barrier, and tackled Chappelle right on stage. The attacker was carrying a replica gun fitted with a folding knife blade. It could have gone horribly wrong. Chappelle was shaken, but thankfully not seriously hurt. Within seconds, security, along with a few celebrity friends, including Jamie Foxx, rushed in and brought the guy down. But that night proved something chilling. The slap wasn't just a viral moment. It had shifted the energy in comedy, in Hollywood, and maybe even in how people understood what standing up for yourself meant. Isaiah Lee had been hit with 4 misdemeanor charges, including battery and possession of a weapon with intent to assault. The whole comedy world froze for a second, realizing this wasn't random. Something had shifted. Comedy club owner Danny Den said it best. What changed after the Will Smith slap was something every comedian instantly felt deep in their bones. Before that night, there was an invisible fence around performers, an unspoken rule that kept audiences in their seats and comics safe on stage. But after that slap, that fence was gone. Danny had even predicted it, that someone would cross that line again. And when Chappelle got attacked, her words hit like prophecy. This is where Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy's voices matter more than ever, because both of them have lived that stage life. Kevin's performed in front of packed stadiums, hundreds of thousands of people screaming his name. His shows are full-blown global events. And Eddie, his stand-up specials, Delirious and Raw, are still considered holy ground in comedy, the gold standard. These men know exactly what it feels like to stand under those blinding lights, exposed, vulnerable, and armed with nothing but truth and humor. That's why they understood the real violation behind Will Smith's act, because being on that stage comes with a sacred pact, a silent agreement between the performer and the crowd. We give you our truth, and in return, you don't harm us for it. But on that night, Will Smith shattered that trust in front of the entire planet. He walked up on sacred ground, the world's biggest stage, and broke that unspoken promise for everyone to see. And the aftermath made it even worse, because not only did he face no real consequences, 40 minutes later, Hollywood's most powerful room stood up and applauded him. In that one moment, a message went out to every unbalanced viewer watching, to every angry person who thought violence could make a point. This is allowed now. The slap wasn't just about Will and Chris. It was about the world watching and learning the wrong lesson. That night sent a dangerous message to the world. This can be done. This is how you deal with a comedian who offends you. And Dave Chappelle ended up paying the price for it. Ever since that slap, the entire comedy world has been forced to move differently, carefully, always aware that the invisible line between stage and audience might not protect them anymore. Kevin Hart understood that danger on a soul level. Comedy only works when it's free. It needs room to fail, to offend, to push buttons and step into messy, uncomfortable truth. But the second comedians start performing with real fear, the second they start wondering if a punchline might bring an actual punch, the art form begins to die. The jokes get safer, the voices get quieter, the sharp edges that make comedy powerful start to dull. Eddie Murphy built his entire legend on those edges. Delirious and Raw were bold, fearless, electric. They made people squirm and laugh at the same time, because that's what truth-telling comedy does. But imagine if back then Eddie had to worry about someone rushing the stage, knife in hand, every time he told a risky joke. Those classics, the ones that define generations, might not even exist today.
And that's the real lasting consequence of the Will Smith slap. It wasn't just one man's career taking a hit. It wasn't just a broken friendship or a viral Oscar moment. The real legacy is colder, a chilling effect that still lingers over comedy itself. Because when comedians start holding back out of fear, we all lose the mirror that shows us our absurdities, our contradictions, our truth. Months later, in July 2022, Will Smith tried to address the fallout. He uploaded a video to his YouTube channel, titled it An Apology. It was meant to show remorse, to make amends, to speak directly to Chris Rock. But what came next left almost everyone feeling something very different. In that YouTube video, Will Smith said he had reached out to Chris Rock, but that Chris wasn't ready to talk. He admitted he'd been in a rage that night and insisted Jada had nothing to do with it. On the surface, it sounded like closure. But when Chris Rock finally spoke about it, months later, during his joint tour with Dave Chappelle in Liverpool, he tore that illusion to pieces. He called Will's apology a hostage video. And that phrase deserves a pause, because a hostage video isn't an act of real remorse, it's a performance of it. It's what you release when you're trapped by circumstance, by damage control, or by a collapsing reputation. It's carefully written, perfectly lit, strategically timed, designed to achieve one thing: survival. Not truth, not healing, just optics. That's exactly what Chris meant, in the language only comedians truly understand. He wasn't just mocking Will, he was decoding him. He was saying that what the world saw as an apology was really just PR dressed up in redemption. It was accountability wearing a costume. Kevin Hart, who's had to issue his own public apologies for real, messy, life-changing mistakes, knows the difference better than anyone. A genuine apology sounds different, feels different, lands different. It's not scripted by a team of publicists. It's not dropped on a YouTube schedule. It comes when a person has actually done the hard work, when they're ready to face their truth, not just clean up their image. That's why Kevin didn't co-sign Will's apology. He didn't praise it. He didn't even call it brave. He just stayed silent. And that silence said everything. And then there's Eddie Murphy, who spent 50 years watching Hollywood twist truth into whatever version sells best. He's seen how the industry turns honesty into strategy, how apologies become PR tools, how every statement gets optimized for the next opportunity. Murphy knows better than anyone. In Hollywood, accountability often isn't about what's real, it's about what looks right. Eddie Murphy knows exactly what a real reckoning looks like, and just as easily, he can spot when someone's trying to fake one. He's seen enough crisis management dressed up in redemption to know the difference instantly. That's why he never had to say which category Will Smith's apology video fell into. His silence said everything. His presence in that room on Oscar night already told the whole story. But what came next might be the most revealing twist in this entire saga. After Chris Rock's Selective Outrage special dropped, sources close to Will Smith claimed he was furious, not hurt, not humbled, furious. Apparently, Will felt that Chris had crossed a line. He believed that after his so-called attempts to apologize, Chris should have let it go, that it was time to move on. He was even angry that Netflix gave Chris a global platform to tell his side, and he reportedly thought Chris's jokes about Jada were flat out unacceptable. Let that sink in for a second. Will Smith, the man who walked onto a stage in front of the entire planet and slapped Chris Rock on live television, thought Chris was the one crossing the line? That's not just irony, that's denial at a Hollywood level. Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy both understood the psychology behind that mindset instantly. They've seen it play out in boardrooms, on film sets, and inside award show politics. Because when you reach a certain level of fame and power, something dangerous happens. The world around you starts bending to protect your ego. The consequences get softer, the truth gets filtered, and people start convincing you that you're still the victim, even when the receipts say otherwise. That's the bubble Will Smith had been living in for years, a world where accountability always came with a safety net, and where the idea of being called out felt more offensive than the act that caused it. Murphy and Hart didn't need to lecture him. They've watched that same Hollywood trap swallow men before, but rarely has the fall been this public or this revealing. In Hollywood, apologies smooth things over. Money fixes problems. Time erases headlines. That's how the system works, or at least how it used to. The usual rules of accountability that apply to regular people get softened, delayed, and eventually buried under glitz and PR spin. And Will Smith, he counted on that machine to do exactly what it had always done for him.
He expected the apology video to close the chapter. He expected Chris Rock to play along, to accept the closure on his timeline, stay quiet, and let the story fade away. But Chris Rock didn't play that game. He didn't move on quietly, and every comedian, Kevin Hart, Eddie Murphy, and beyond, understood exactly why. Because beneath the celebrity drama, there's a deeper layer that most people missed, one that only men like Hart and Murphy could speak to with real authority. It's the experience of being a black man in Hollywood, living in a system that celebrates your success while quietly exploiting it. A world that loves the shine of black excellence but rarely protects the people who carry it. Chris Rock spoke directly to that truth in Selective Outrage, and he did it with one devastating punchline that hit like both a laugh and a lesson. He said, "I didn't fight back at the Oscars because my parents raised me not to fight in front of white people." The crowd laughed, but then the room went still because everyone felt the weight behind it. That joke wasn't just about restraint, it was about survival. It was about generational wisdom passed down in black families, the kind that teaches you how to navigate spaces where every move is watched, every emotion is measured, and every outburst gets magnified tenfold. Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy have both lived that reality too. They know what it means to carry the pressure of being the example, the one who can't afford to slip, the one expected to represent millions with every smile and every headline. That's why they understood what Chris's joke really meant, that in that moment on that stage, Chris Rock didn't just hold his composure, he carried the burden of centuries of expectation. Kevin Hart has talked for years about the unique weight that comes with being a black entertainer who reaches universal appeal. When you make it that big, you're not just performing, you're balancing between worlds. Every joke, every word, every move has to land with everybody. The fans who adore you, the critics who doubt you, and the industry that wants to profit off you without ever fully understanding you. You're always performing for multiple audiences at once, and those audiences rarely want the same thing. Hart knows that pressure firsthand. He's lived that tightrope walk, the one where you're constantly managing your image, constantly aware that a single mistake could blow up and be twisted into something bigger than the truth. And he's paid for those mistakes in public, with the whole world watching. But what makes Kevin different is that he faced it head on. He didn't hide behind PR or the illusion of control. He did the real work, the kind of accountability that isn't performed, earned. Eddie Murphy, on the other hand, represents another path entirely, the man who refused to let Hollywood own him. His early comedy wasn't just funny, it was dangerous, raw, bold, and unapologetically black. He didn't beg for acceptance or water himself down to fit the mold. Hollywood tried to smooth out his edges, make him easier to digest, and he said no. He stepped back rather than bend, and when he came back years later, it was on his own terms. That's why his legend still hits different. And then there's Will Smith, the third category, the man who did give Hollywood what it wanted. He became the golden boy, the safe superstar, the perfect blend of charm, warmth, and polish. The Fresh Prince persona made him loved around the world, but also trapped him inside an image that wasn't built to hold a real person. For 30 years, that act became so airtight, so controlled, that it eventually replaced everything authentic underneath. So when Chris Rock chose not to fight back at the Oscars, when he stood there, calm, holding it all in, that was more than restraint. It was wisdom born from experience. It was a man who understood what it means to live under that spotlight and what's really at stake when you lose control in front of it.
Will Smith's walk across that stage wasn't just an outburst, it was a breaking point. It was the move of a man who had lost touch with his own center, a man who had been so far removed from his true self that when the pain finally boiled over, the only language he had left to speak was violence. That moment didn't just happen out of nowhere. It was the end result of years of choices, all leading to that one unforgettable moment in 2022. A moment that couldn't be taken back, rewritten, or excused away.
Then came the silence, the verdict that said everything without saying a word. Because here's the truth about powerful men in Hollywood. Sometimes what they don't say screams the loudest. Kevin Hart never tore Will Smith apart publicly. He didn't drop a savage special. He didn't go on talk shows or build clout off the controversy. And that silence, from a man who's usually an open book, who talks about everything from scandal to self-reflection, was deafening. But make no mistake, Kevin wasn't protecting Will, he was grieving him. There's a difference, a deep one. Protecting someone means defending their choices, standing beside them even when they're wrong. But grieving someone? That means you've accepted that a person you once admired did something you can't unsee, something that forever changed how you look at them. Kevin's silence wasn't loyalty, it was loss. It was the quiet heartbreak of watching someone you once called a brother cross a line so public, so final, that no apology, no award, no smile could ever undo it. And yet, beneath that disappointment, he still saw the human being buried under the mistake. Kevin Hart's grief for Will Smith wasn't casual pity. It was the heartbreak of someone who saw it coming. He'd watched the tension building for years, the pressure stacking up behind the smiles and success, and he knew how heavy that kind of image can get when it starts cracking. So when it finally broke in the most public, devastating way possible, Kevin wasn't shocked, he was hurt, because he understood exactly how a man can get lost inside his own performance. Eddie Murphy's silence, though, carried a different kind of power. Murphy's been watching Hollywood's game for half a century, and he has no illusions left about how it works. He's seen stars rise from nothing, burn bright, and then get eaten alive by the same system that built them. He's seen what happens when fame becomes your reflection and the truth starts to disappear beneath the surface. So when Eddie chose not to speak about the slap, it wasn't hesitation, it was clarity. It was the calm of a man who's seen this pattern too many times to need to explain it. Some truths, he knows, don't need a speech, they announce themselves. And remember, Eddie was in that room. He watched the whole thing unfold with his own eyes. The same night he stood on that stage to accept a humanitarian award, he also witnessed Hollywood reward an act of violence with a standing ovation. That contrast said everything. Eddie didn't have to talk about the hypocrisy. He lived it in that moment. His silence was its own statement, louder than any interview ever could have been. Together, Kevin Hart's thoughtful words and Eddie Murphy's heavy silence revealed the same undeniable truth, that the Will Smith the world adored was partly a construction. Not a total lie, but not the whole truth either. The talent? Absolutely real. The charm and intelligence? Undeniable. But that seamless perfection, that always smiling, never cracking image of a man who had it all together, that was the act. And when that act finally shattered, what spilled out wasn't just anger. It was everything Will Smith had been holding back for 30 years. The pain behind the performance that Hollywood never wanted to see. That perfect image of Will Smith, the charming, unbreakable superstar, was never just reality. It was a performance, a mask built carefully over decades. And that mask had been cracking long before that night at the Oscars. Dave Chappelle saw it rip off in real time and said he hoped Will would finally let his real face breathe.
Will Hart saw it tear apart and understood the heavy price of wearing something that fake for that long. And Eddie Murphy? He looked at that mask lying shattered on the floor and saw the truth every performer eventually faces: the brutal cost of choosing performance over authenticity for 30 straight years. Since that night, Will Smith has been mostly quiet. His 10-year Oscars ban still stands, and his once flawless reputation has taken hits that no amount of PR spin can ever erase. Some of his movie projects have struggled, and the billion-dollar brand that used to feel untouchable has been cracked wide open. What once made him Hollywood's safest star, that carefully managed perfection, is now what makes people question everything about him. But Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy both know something that Will Smith might still be learning. A career can survive scandal. Hollywood has buried reputations before and watched them rise again from the rubble. What decides whether someone truly comes back isn't how rich they are or how famous they were. It's how real they get afterwards. The audience can forgive almost anything if they believe the redemption is genuine, not rehearsed, not timed, not staged. That's the difference Hart learned the hard way. When his own controversies blew up, he didn't survive because of clever PR or perfect timing. He survived because people could feel that his reckoning was real, that he wasn't just trying to fix his image, but fix himself. And that's exactly the kind of work Will Smith still has ahead of him if he ever wants to reclaim who he really is.
Eddie Murphy's comeback is the perfect example of what that kind of truth looks like in action. Hollywood tried to water him down, to smooth out the danger, the honesty, the rawness that made him a legend. But when he finally came back, he didn't reinvent himself into something new. He just showed up as the real Eddie Murphy again, uncompromised, unfiltered, unapologetic. And the world didn't just accept him, it celebrated him for it. Because deep down, people don't want perfection, they want authenticity. If Will Smith wants a path forward, if there even is one, it can't come from another polished apology video or a flashy blockbuster comeback designed to remind fans of the old Will. It can't be engineered through carefully staged interviews or choreographed media moments meant to rebuild his brand. The road back doesn't run through the red carpet, it runs through the mirror. The real work Will needs to do isn't glamorous, it's quiet, lonely, and uncomfortable. The kind of self-examination that doesn't care how it looks to the outside world. Because this isn't about rebranding, it's about reckoning. It's about confronting what that slap revealed, not about others, but about himself. Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy are proof that survival in Hollywood isn't about being untouchable, it's about being real. Both men are still here, still respected, still thriving in the same industry that nearly crushed them, the same machine that built Will Smith and then watched him break. The difference between their journeys and his has nothing to do with luck or talent. It's all about choices. The choices made at every crossroad, to be honest or to perform, to do the real work or just the visible work, to be a person or a brand. And that's where Will Smith stands now, right back at another fork in the road. The truth is, he's always had choices. The only question left is, will he finally choose himself? Now that the mask is gone, ripped off for the whole world to see, the question is whether Will Smith has the courage to finally make the right choices. Because now there's no more pretending, no more perfect act to hide behind. What he does next will show us who he really is. Not the movie star, not the brand, but the man. So where does that leave us now? Chris Rock gave us his pain transformed into precision, rage sharpened into comedy so cutting it hit straight to the bone. Dave Chappelle gave us something deeper, the uneasy wisdom of a man who could see both sides, who felt empathy not just for the one who got hit, but for the one who did the hitting. And Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy, they gave us something even heavier, context, the perspective of men who actually know what it costs to live like Will Smith.
Men who've walked that same Hollywood tightrope, who felt the pressure to be everything for everyone, to smile through pain, to perform an identity until it becomes a trap. They saw not just the slap, but the man behind it, buried under years of expectation and exhaustion. Because the truth is, the Will Smith the world grew up loving, the Fresh Prince, the king of summer blockbusters, the man who made us laugh and hitch and cry in the pursuit of happiness, that version of him was real. The talent was real. The charm was real. The joy he brought to millions was absolutely real. But it was never the whole picture. Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy revealed the rest, the part hidden behind the polish. And that truth, it's heavier than the slap, sadder than the scandal, and far more human than any of us wanted to admit. Because the real story here isn't that Will Smith lost control on that stage, it's that the control we thought he had was never real to begin with. That's what Hart understood, what Murphy quietly witnessed, and what Chappelle boldly named, that the mask wasn't broken that night. It had been cracking for years. The slap didn't destroy the illusion, it just finally exposed it for what it always was, an act that couldn't last forever. The perfection was never real, it was always the performance. The mask wasn't strength, it was a shield. And behind that flawless smile, that calm control, was something raw, unhealed, and aching for real attention. When the mask finally shattered on that Oscar stage, what we saw underneath wasn't a monster, it was a man damaged by years of pressure, desperate to hold on, and in that terrible, hyper-lit moment, convinced that hitting someone smaller was the same thing as being strong. Kevin Hart and Eddie Murphy have both lived long enough and learned hard enough to know the truth. Strength isn't how loud you hit back, it's how deep you heal. They've faced their own demons under the same lights and figured out what real power actually looks like: authenticity, humility, and the courage to be real, even when it hurts. And that's the question Will Smith has to face now, the one only he can answer. Has he learned the difference between performing strength and living it? Is he ready to stop hiding behind the image and do the real work of being a man again? So tell us in the comments, do you think Will Smith deserves a second chance, or has the mask come off for good? We want to know what you think. If this story gave you something real to think about, hit that like button, drop a comment, share it with someone who used to believe Will Smith was untouchable. And don't forget to subscribe, because we're just getting started. We're pulling back the curtain on the stories Hollywood doesn't want you to remember, the secrets, the truths, the moments that change everything. The next video is already waiting for you. It's right there on your screen. Click it now, because trust me, what's coming next is even wilder.